The Flame, by Harish Mangalam. About the author. Harish Mangalam, a prominent Gujarati Dalit writer. Having started writing at an early age of 13, Mangalam rose to prominence in the 80s when, during the anti-reservation stir in Gujarat, he began writing solely about the downtrodden. He was aware of terrible past involving discrimination based on caste system, exploitation of laborers by the farmers, social injustice, and inequality. All these made him write literature for upliftment of the downtrodden. His first poem is significantly titled, Kisan, Cultivator. His first short story is called, Vapas, Come Back. His first novel is titled Tirade, Crack. His first collection of short stories is Talap, The Craving. Critical analysis of the short story The Flame. The Flame was first published in Nayamag, a Gujarati monthly magazine under the title, Zol, in the year 1992. It is a powerful rendering of an age-old saga of torment, suffering and pain resulting from poverty, social discrimination and distinction, inequality, and hatred of the Dalits by the privileged and the upper class. The protagonist of this story, referred to as that man, not only suffers physically, but also psychologically. He suffers on account of something that happened to him many years ago. He refers to a mosquito bite that caused to him eczema, and the itch this disease gave refused to subside or diminish. He consulted many doctors, swallowed a cocktail of medicines and applied ointment after ointment, but no relief came. The story works at two levels. For instance, the protagonist's mind was so, along with the body which does not exist. The man remained restless, discussed it with his friends, and even thought of getting his leg above the knee amputated lest the eczema should spread. His friends suggested against it. He found that the friends discussed Marx and his ideas, which did not lead him anywhere. In the story, the protagonist's wife is amused at his talk of eczema because she cannot see it anywhere, and the man on the other side feels sorry that she cannot notice the foul spreading of the disease. At the same time, all his friends suffer from eczema. However, they fail to find a doctor who can help them. Later, they look at the statue when a sudden explosion occurs and the sky is filled with flames rising high. The story ends with this explosion, leaving the friends looking at the sky that turns into a red-hot ball of fire, full of flames. In the beginning, a man suffering from a chronic disease, eczema, is introduced. He has had this disease for almost half a century. The man is of no ordinary sensibility and is conversant with the undercurrents of devilry in the system that governs his life, and has left a scar on his mind, adding to the scars on his body. He is one who has reached a level of perception that others may find hard to attain. The disease is symbolic of a deeper malady eating into human vitality. It could be broadly named untouchability in caste system. The flame in the title is symbolic of the flame of communal hatred and violence which keeps on spreading as the bacteria keep multiplying and corrupting the human flesh. The narrator's memory keeps swinging back to the past and then returns to the present. He remembers how in village Toda, a mosquito bit him that caused an itch. For him, it has remained ever since, till today, it's itch, itch, itch. The narrator is critical of the system that he has found, devoid of any attitude to. We are 2 million and yet we live as it is, in the same old ways. There are hints in the story of the eczema being only in the mind of the narrator and nowhere on his body. He has been affected by the evils of the class society, untouchability, and social discrimination. His wife's laughter at his brooding over the disease has a deep meaning. She suggests the cure for the disease, but her asking, "But where is the eczema?" shows her indifference towards his pain. At the end of the story, the dimensions of anger get widened, and the personal scar of the narrator becomes the scar of a group of his friends that represent a larger section of untouchables. One friend tells him about the nightmare he suffered in Bihar for marrying a Savarna girl, and in retaliation, bore the brunt of the wrath of ghosts of castes, ending with stabbing his private parts with spear. Another friend shows the eczema in the armpit and ventilates his anger, saying, "The burning flame of Jetalpur charred me here." Still another shows his neck, and the fifth shows buttocks with the dark patches of eczema. In consequence, silence pervades. The question why all of them suffer, symbolic of primitive savagery, in silence, leaves them stunned. Following this, the statue of a world-famous doctor is introduced, signifying hope for salvation. It definitely is the statue of Baba Saheb Ambedkar. It is said of him that the man found the cure of eczema. But he died working hard and haunted by anxiety. Anger seizes them. The angry gaze is fixed at the statue, which seems to be shaking. Soon, there is a sudden explosion, flames rise high, and the sky turns into a red-hot ball. It is not that the explosion symbolizes the destruction of values associated with the statue of the world-famous doctor. Instead, it signifies a formula for communal harmony. What needs to be fostered is love of humankind as a whole and respect to all alike, high or low. The emphasis seems to shift to the creative role of superstructure in a class society. How the ruling class imposes their value orientation upon the ruled with their consent is convincingly brought out by Gramsci's concept of bourgeois cultural hegemony. It is in this context that the proletarian class needs to have their own superstructure to hit back at the bourgeois base and expose the sophistry of its value pattern. There seems inherent in the story a questioning of Marxism. Still, it is not a rejection of Marxism but a version that incorporates changes in view of happenings in the 20th century. The man in the story says, Marx. The so-called intellectuals have made him only a subject of discussion. Empty discussion. And he had the itch again. The writer finds no remedy of his itch in Marxism. They found substance in his talk, continuous discussions, pamphlets, reports, exchange of ideas, and yet it had led them nowhere. It shows the writer's advocacy for radical action rather than any sterile ideology. Sharan Kumar Limbal's comments are pertinent in this regard. He says in his book Towards an Aesthetics of Dalit Literature that Marxists in India waged struggles on workers' issues, but they paid no attention to the caste system and untouchability. If they had done so, there would have been a creative development of Marxism consistent with Indian conditions. Limbale further says that inequality in Indian society is not the consequence of capitalism alone, it is a much more complex disparity, and there can be no movement forward unless the place of caste, morality, and truth in Hinduism is evaluated. A common battle will have to be fought on both social and economic fronts. Dr. Ambedkar too opined that Indian Marxism was incomplete in the context of the Indian social system because it did not think about ending caste discrimination. The writer, a devotee of Ambedkar, also supports this view, and the man in the story a victim of the hideous caste system himself, becomes the mouthpiece of the writer. Symbolism. Symbolism expresses the invisible by means of visible and is a powerful technique in the hands of the artist to reinforce a meaning. The flame is replete with symbols that make it a strong statement against atrocities committed on the downtrodden. From the beginning to the end of the story, the writer employs highly suggestive symbols. There has been a free play of some other stylistic devices also, like irony, sarcasm and satire, to dig at the forces of social disharmony. Firstly, the eczema that the man suffers from is symbolic of the malady which is eating into dignity and moral health. It is the epidemic of untouchability, class consciousness and caste stratification. The eczema spreads in the body, and leaves patches of scars by continuous scratching. The protagonist is not able to get rid of the restlessness and itch caused by the disease following the mosquito bite. The mosquito also is a powerful symbol of those that bite, the bourgeois, the upper caste groups that render a whole section helpless. On the other hand, the affected protagonist is representative of the entire community of untouchables. Like the protagonist of the story, the society finds no cure of this disease. The disease is chronic and has been continuing for centuries with no possible solution in sight. The wife of the protagonist laughs loudly at his pain, which is symbolic of the section of the privileged. The writer points to those who capitalize on these problems of society for their own selfish motives. He is critical of those who enjoy the power of money. To quote, "If the eczema gets cured, then doctor's practice gets ruined, his air conditioner stops working, spring of his revolving chair breaks, wheels of his car get stuck in the mud." Expanding on the insensitivity of society towards the Dalits, he says, "Do our heartbeats reach to his heart through his stethoscope? No, no." The writer is critical of the reformist attitude of Gandhi and his policy of non-violence and peaceful protest. What needs to be done is restructuring the system by kindling the flame of revolution. The man in the story is greatly dismayed. Did the eczema get any better? Look how it has rotten down. Did Ayurvedic doctors too get it cured? Dr. Gandhi, Dr. Andhi and Dr. Pandhi, how did they treat? The revolutionary stance of the writer is clear when he says, "I will embrace death with a smiling face, but I don't wish to get treated by them." According to the writer, the predicament of the Dalits has continued to exist despite the efforts made by reformists like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Mahatma Gandhi. That is why the statue of the world-famous doctor evokes respect, and all look at it in deep reverence. The vision of change is captured thus: all directions rang. That man and his friends stared at the statue for without blinking their eyes for long. Like the clouds in the sky, time passed swiftly. The statue shook. The friends of the protagonist symbolize a collective consciousness, a community instead of an individual having suffered at the hands of social discrimination. There is hint of the need to make collective effort for the upliftment of the weak. Limbale has commented, "This anguish of Dalits is the progenitor of Dalit literature. It is in the nature of a collective social voice." Similarly, the rejection and revolt are also social and collective. The flames at the end of the story become the flames, kindling hope for the entire community of Dalits. Autobiographical element. The protagonist of the story, that man, is a representative of the community of the Dalits and the downtrodden to whom the writer belongs. The writer relates with the protagonist suffering from the eczema, since he had experienced the pain and misery of the millions like him. The protagonist of the story has not been given any name, and has been called that man purposely by the writer. This is to establish an affinity between him and all the others suffering from the chronic eczema. The writer universalizes the problem by not limiting it to one name, or one person. It is this idea that brings the writer close to the protagonist. There is mention in the story of Gujarat cyclone, hitting one of the writer's friends badly. The Dalits' right of reservation had never been approved by non-Dalits. The first organized and violent anti-reservation movement occurred in Gujarat in 1981. Anti-Dalit riots broke out in Ahmedabad, Nadiyad and Vadodara. Several Dalit hamlets were torched and looted. Rioters killed 12 Dalits and injured hundreds. As Mangalam was a witness to all this in Ahmedabad, he has made a reference to this in his story. Characters. 1. Protagonist. The protagonist is typically the central character whose journey drives the narrative forward. They may undergo significant development or change throughout the story, grappling with challenges or conflicts that force them to confront their beliefs and values. 2. Antagonist. The antagonist presents obstacles or conflicts for the protagonist to overcome. This doesn't necessarily have to be a villain. It could be a force of nature, societal norms, or even the protagonist's own inner demons. 3. Supporting characters. Supporting characters serve various roles in the story, such as providing aid or hindrance to the protagonist, serving as foils or mirrors for the protagonist's development, or representing different perspectives or ideologies. 4. Dynamic versus static characters. Characters may be dynamic, undergoing significant change or growth throughout the story, or static, remaining relatively unchanged. Both types of characters contribute to the narrative in different ways, highlighting themes or providing contrast. Themes. 1. Identity and self-discovery. Many short stories delve into themes of self-discovery and the journey towards understanding one's true identity. Characters often undergo transformative experiences or confront challenges that force them to reassess their beliefs and values. 2. Conflict and resolution. Conflict is a fundamental element of storytelling, and short stories frequently explore various forms of conflict, whether internal, struggles within oneself, or external, struggles with others or the environment. Resolution, or lack thereof, often highlights the character's growth or stagnation. 3. Isolation and connection. Short stories often explore the dichotomy between isolation and connection. Characters may grapple with feelings of loneliness or alienation, seeking meaningful connections with others or grappling with the consequences of solitude. 4. Symbolism and allegory. Symbolism is a powerful tool in short fiction, allowing authors to convey deeper meanings and themes through metaphorical or allegorical elements. Objects, settings, or events may carry symbolic significance, enriching the story's themes and characters.